Hey, what's up? Welcome into the program. I am Joel Klatt. This is Breaking the Huddle, and as always, it is brought to you by Dr. Pepper, the one fans deserve. Lots to get into as we've got a brand new season of college football upon us. Here we go. First of all, best time of year. This is no doubt the best time of year. Everybody's got that hope and optimism that, like, this is the year that we're going to get there. We're going to go to the college football playoff, and I love it. A lot of great players returning. But before we actually get into my top 10 teams going into this 2023 season, we do have to put a button on what was a wild offseason. And that offseason was dominated by conference realignment. And so let's recap and just make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what went on and why it went on. These were the teams that ended up making the announcement that they will be moving conferences at the end of next year and into 2024. Washington and Oregon, they're going to head to the Big Ten, while Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah, the four corner schools, if you will, are all headed to the Big 12. Now, let's take a look at how we got here. Why is this happening? Everyone always just immediately blames, well, it's just the almighty dollar and greed and all this. Well, yes and no. Let's actually take a step further back and realize that the Pac-12, which all of these teams play in this year, and USC and UCLA, who left a year ago, the Pac-12, they made several decisions over the course of the last 10 and 12 years that led to their own demise. Okay? And so that lack of leadership in the conference ended up materializing into what we've seen over the course of the last two off seasons, and in particular late in this last off season, in which all of these six schools are going to leave conferences. If you look at what happened over the last decade, you'll see that the Pac-12 made a poor decision with their own network. A lot of people have talked about this, where they didn't get the distribution that they needed. And because of that, the value and the revenue distribution was not there per school. When that happened, then the teams didn't get the revenue nor the exposure that they expected or needed. At that point, they've got to make a decision. Okay. And at that moment, there's a lot that had already gone on in college football, because remember, it's not just these moves that have happened. If you take a look at what's gone on across college football, it was actually the last in a series of dominoes that started when Texas and Oklahoma said that they were going to move from the Big 12 into the SEC. So now we start to look at the entire landscape of the Power Five. The Big Ten Conference is going to move to 18 total teams, with 4 new West Coast teams coming in. They're not losing anybody. The SEC is going to 16 with Oklahoma and Texas. They're not losing anybody. The Big 12 is gaining 4, but losing 2, but they also added 4. They're going to be at 16 because of everything that's gone on over the last couple of years. The ACC is standing pat, and the Pac-12, unfortunately, is down to 4. 8 of the 12 teams are leaving, and they are on life support at this point. When OU and Texas went to the SEC, then teams like USC, they looked at the landscape and they thought to themselves, how are we going to compete at the top end unless we're in a conference in which is going to afford us the same type of distribution that those schools are getting? So they felt like they had to go to the Big Ten. When that happened, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 had a decision to make. And this is the main point of what went on just a few weeks ago. There was one television deal left because the entire pie had been taken up by the NFL, by the Big Ten, by the SEC. And so all the linear networks basically had enough money for one college conference to get a new television deal. The Big 12 beat the Pac-12 to that deal. They secured their rights on linear television with a deal between Fox and ESPN. When that happened, the Pac-12 was unfortunately out of luck. They tried to cobble together a streaming deal, but that streaming deal was way too similar to that deal that I talked about in terms of their own network, where they were relying on subscribers and interest to drive value, and they had learned their lesson from a decade ago. That didn't work. They declined it, and at that point, it became trying to find a lifeboat off of the Titanic. So why did we get here? a long string of dominoes. It wasn't one decision. It was a series of decisions that led to this moment in which the Pac-12 is on life support, and we've got mega conferences now throughout college football. But that's not why we're excited, is it? We're excited about actual games. So when we come back here after the break, let me break down my top 10 teams going into the 2023 season. All right, welcome back into the program. Let's get into things that are actually interesting for this season, which is a preseason top 10. Now, I know that we've seen, some games in week 0, but here we go. Let's get into it now as we're really entering into the beginning of the college football season. These are the top 10 teams as I see them going into the year. Let's start with number 1, and number 1 I think should be an obvious one to everybody. I don't understand why people wouldn't put this team number 1, and that's Georgia. Georgia's the 2-time defending national champion. They are on an incredible run at this point. The only game that they've lost in the last 2 years was to a loaded Alabama team that, by the way, had all their wide receivers that day. So, Georgia is a team that has to be beaten. Right? I'm not going to not put them number 1 just because I think maybe somebody else might win in the SEC, which I actually don't think is the case. Georgia's number 1, and they deserve to be number 1. Kirby Smart is building something that is very special. They're trying to become the first team to three-peat since the 30s, all the way back when Minnesota did it. And, I mean, who knows? It hasn't been done. Modern college football, what they're doing has never been done, or at least what they're trying to do. Teams have gotten close. Teams have gotten very close, but they will be trying for a three-peat here this year. Number 2, I've got Michigan. Now, I debated between 3 teams here, Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama. I landed on Michigan in mostly because what they have returning on this roster suggests that it's going to be Michigan's best team under Jim Harbaugh. This is a team that has just won back-to-back Big Ten titles. They've been in the playoff each of the last 2 years, and now they're returning a very good, deep offensive line that got some transfer help as well. Both of their running backs in the backfield. Their quarterback is back. Their defense is loaded. This is going to be an excellent team. There's no doubt about it. I really believe that this could be Jim Harbaugh's best team in Ann Arbor. Now, at number 3, I've got the team that they have beaten each of the last 2 years, and that's Ohio State. This Ohio State team basically has one question, and that is, can they replace C.J. Stroud at quarterback? They are loaded everywhere on this team. C.J. Stroud, he's gone. He's with the Texans now. Who's the quarterback? We wait and see, but they have an amazing roster. They should be better running the football. They can throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr., and the defense has gotten much better as well, in particular on the defensive line, which they need to get better on the defensive line. At number 4, I've got Alabama. Nick Saban is still Nick Saban, folks. It's not like they're going anywhere. Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach in the history of the sport. Now, they also have quarterback questions, and I think that they actually have more questions than Ohio State at that position because they had to go get Tyler Buchner, a transfer out of the transfer portal after spring ball. So Nick Saban is going to be trying to rebuild that offense with new offensive coordinator Tommy Rees and a new quarterback. Maybe it's Jalen Milroe, maybe it's Tyler Buchner. We don't know, but it's still Alabama. They still have recruited at the top end of the sport. That's one of the best rosters in the sport. They're number 4. At number 5, I've got Penn State. How about that? 3 Big Ten East teams there in the top 5. I really like what Penn State has returning. I like Drew Aller, their young quarterback. I think he's going to be a heck of a player. They're good on the offensive line. Olu Fashanu could have been the first offensive tackle taken in last year's draft. He came back. They've got both of their running backs back. They've got speed, length, and athleticism on every level of their defense, including at pass rusher with Chop Robinson. I'm a big fan of Penn State. Their only losses were to Michigan and Ohio State a year ago. So this is a year. Can they knock down that door of Michigan or Ohio State in the Big Ten East? At 6, a bit of a surprise team, but I like Washington here at 6. Washington has a great quarterback, Heisman dark horse, and Michael Penix. Great core of wide receivers led by Rome Odunze. And this is a team that I think could win the Pac-12. You look at their schedule, you look at what they have returning, you look at their head coach, Kalen DeBoer. That's a really good football team. They were close last year to being in that Pac-12 championship game and potentially going to the Rose Bowl, and I think that they will have a great chance this year as well. At number 7, I've got LSU. LSU is second year now for Brian Kelly. Their quarterback is back. They loaded up in the transfer portal. They've got a great opening week matchup against Florida State. I believe they win that game. They're number 7. I really like LSU this year. Number 8, I've got USC. We've already seen them play. Hey, guess what? Offense, really good. Zachariah Branch, this true freshman, I think he's the most explosive and exciting young player in college football. Watching him play was absolutely incredible. They still have Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley, which means that even if you're going to beat them, you're going to have to play incredible defense or you're going to have to outscore them, which is hard to do. Let's just say it. It's hard to do. Caleb Williams trying to become a back-to-back Heisman Trophy winner, first since Archie Griffin. Can he do it? I'm not sure. I mean, in our society and in particular in Heisman voting circles, Heisman voters typically love to hate the favorite. He's certainly the favorite, but they're going to put up some monster numbers. I've got questions about their defense. Even from what I saw against San Jose State, there were glimpses of something that was going to be better and improved. There were also glimpses of a defense that was too aggressive and ran themselves out of plays and gave up too many points because of that. So that's a bit of a wait and see with USC. But that Pac-12, man, USC, Washington in there in the top 10. At number 9 and 10, I'm going both ACC here. I'm going to go Clemson ahead of Florida State, who's going to be number 10. And they go together kind of. Why? Because, well, I think Clemson is going to continue to own the ACC. They get Garrett Riley as their offensive coordinator. You pair him up with Cade Klubnik, their quarterback. You pair him up with Shipley, their running back, and that offense, which was the only question I had for Clemson coming into the season, is going to be much better. I can't wait to see them play. I think that they're going to be really good. And while Florida State, I like the hype. I get it. I like Jordan Travis. They're still not Clemson to me. And so that's why they fall at number 10. Really like them, but I don't think they're going to beat Clemson. I don't think they're going to beat LSU. And because of that, they fall to number 10. Okay, coming straight up, PJ Fleck. Gus and I, with Jenny, are going to be in Minnesota on Thursday night for our opener on Fox. So PJ Fleck joins us live on Breaking the Huddle. Welcome back to the program, Breaking the Huddle here, and pleased to be joined by the head coach of the Minnesota Gophers. That's PJ Fleck. PJ Fleck joins the show, and I got to tell you, Coach, I'm so excited to get up to see the Gophers, your team this year. We've got you. Gus and I and Jenny are coming up Thursday night on Fox as you guys host Nebraska. So thanks for your time, man. How are you?
I'm doing elite, man. Thanks for having us on the show, and we look forward to putting the sold-out gold out on display.
Exactly. So I've been reading about this. We got the sold out, gold out going on. Now your fan base has been really good for a few years, but this is obviously taking it up a notch. A Thursday night, and this Nebraska team is, I'll say, like a bit of an unknown. You know, new coach with Matt Rule, who we all know, but some new pieces certainly. What do you expect for Thursday night?
Well, we really don't know. If you're talking just schematics. Personnel, you just really don't know. It's a little bit like preparing for Ghost, and it truly is, because it's not just preparing for a 4-3 or an under front. I mean, they're running a 3-3-5, which means you can get to any down front at any time. 4 down, 5 down, 3 down, odd eye. You can get to all of it. You can blitz to any part of it, and we just don't know what they like with their personnel yet. But I do know one thing: Matt Rule is a really good friend of mine, and his team is going to be prepared. They are going to play incredibly hard. And, they hired him to bring Nebraska back. And I've known Matt for a long time, and he hasn't failed at much, that's for sure.
No, I'm excited for him and for Nebraska, because I think all of us that love college football, we know that, Nebraska belongs in a different spot than what it's been over the last, course of a decade or so. But where you guys have come is a different place. And you guys have been so solid over the last few years. Great football teams that you've had. Strong on defense. Veteran. leadership at quarterback and running back, 9 wins. You guys have built something very special in Minneapolis. And I'll be the first to say it's easy to look at your team this year and say like, oh, but they're losing those veterans. Something tells me that's not the case, though. Yeah, you might have some new faces at important positions, but the heartbeat of your program still remains, Coach.
Yeah, well, on paper, I mean, I think people would agree with you that, you're set to take a step back. Not only that, you sit there and have the hardest schedule in America along with Ole Miss. But we've kind of twisted that to our players and said it's the most opportunistic schedule in America. Here lies one of the most challenging schedules right in front of you, and go get it. We've promoted and our administration has done a great job of saying, hey, listen, if we want to be able to bring Minnesota back and have cultural sustainability, it's going to take just that. It's going to have coaches that stay, philosophical beliefs that stay, beliefs in recruiting, beliefs in schematic schemes. And then our fan base can really get used to what they're going to get year in, year out. No team's ever the same. But when you look at it, really good coaches and really good programs adapt their systems to the type of players that they have. This is our 7th year being here. The transfer portal has allowed us to fill some gaps. But we're at a point where I'm not saying that, on paper, we're reloaded with 5-star, 4-star athletes constantly. But when you look at us, we've got a mixture of inexperience plus experience. But the inexperienced guys are a lot better than they've ever been. Yeah. And the experienced guys are guys that are better than they've ever been. And our job is to keep that cultural sustainability going and take the floor and rise the floor. And if we can do that and raise the floor, then, we got a chance, just like a lot of other people.
I agree with you. One of those guys that may be inexperienced, but certainly talented, and maybe raising the level of this position, which is hard to say because this is going to sound like a knock on Tanner Morgan, and it's not. The guy's the all-time winningest quarterback in Minnesota history. He was awesome. I love Tanner. Ethan, your new quarterback, Callie McManus, might be a little bit more talented. Now, we don't know if he's going to play as well as Tanner, but as far as that floor, you could, in theory, say, boy, this could be a team that gets back to the 2018-19 Minnesota teams that could really throw it around the lot because you're strong at receiver, and I feel like you've got a really good, young, inexperienced quarterback.
Yeah, and then you throw Brevin Spann-Ford at tight end, who's, I think, one of the best tight ends in the country, who's 6'7", 270 as a target. When your best players are your hardest workers, you have something really special culturally. And you go back to Tanner Morgan, he was basically my 6 years leading up to this year, he started pretty much all 6 years. Yeah. You go back to Western Michigan, we had one quarterback.
Are you sure it wasn't 10 years? Are you sure it wasn't 10 years? It felt like 10.
It felt like it. Trust me. He stayed so long. He left with 3 to 4 degrees. I mean, we call him Dr. Morgan. But then you go back to Western Michigan days. We had one quarterback that truly played for us, Zach Terrell, who went from 1-11 to 13-0 in 4 years. And if you look at our tenure, after 10 years, we truly had 2 quarterbacks start for us.
That's wild.
And now it's Ethan's chance. And I'm very loyal to our quarterbacks. I'm very patient with our quarterbacks. Ethan's a very, very, very talented quarterback. He's a talented leader, a talented person, talented worker, and a talented connector. But he's still really young. There's going to be some really amazing things he does this year. Then there's going to have to be some things that he has to row through and work through. But he's got an enormous amount of confidence. And again, we define failing as growth. When he does fail, he grows. Instead of being a failure when quitting and stopping, he doesn't do that. So it's going to be a journey, that's for sure. Going back to 19, as you mentioned, we still only threw the ball 38% of the time.
Well, I know, but it was really successful.
You guys wide receivers for the first time in the history of the conference. So we still are, our philosophical beliefs are our philosophical beliefs. Yeah. It's just, what can we do off of that a little bit differently?
Well, I tell you, it's a pleasure talking with you as always. I can't wait to get up there. Gus is already talking about is it the Loon, right? Where I can get some chicken chili. Is that what?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
you love it.
So he's already getting me all primed for that, and I can't wait to see your team. I think you guys are going to have a really good football team. Physical. You're going to be able to run the football. I think you're going to throw it really well. Your defense has been one of the best in America over the last couple of years. So looking forward to it, Coach, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate you having us on. We'll see you Thursday. Row the boat. Sky Ma, go Gophers.
You got it. There he goes, PJ Fleck. When we come back on Breaking the Huddle, a little Klatt back to finish it out. All right, welcome back into the show. Big thanks to PJ Fleck, and let's get into some Klatt back. First one of the year, and we haven't even really had any games yet, and we've already got Klatt back. Let's head out to X or Twitter, whatever we call it now. Let's head there and see what we've got going on. Godspeed says, or Goodspeed says, Stanley Goodspeed? Any Rock fans? Anyways, watching at Colin Coward talk about OU football with Joel Klatt, he just can't help himself to make every excuse of why OU is so bad, USC and Texas is so good. Yeah, now listen, I'll take exception to this, and I'll back up my son, Colin, in this regard. You can make a strong argument. You can make a strong argument that USC got the way better end of the deal here when Lincoln Riley went to USC, because as much as OU fans just want to say, like, no, we got our guy, everything was fine, that was the first losing season since the John Blake era. Okay, so not everything is fine. And you've got to call a spade, and a spade in the Big 12 is actually that Texas is a little better than OU. They were last year, and they might be again this year. All right, let's get one more here before we take off. Buster says, at Joel Klatt, say something nice about Texas football, please. Buster, I just did. I literally just did, which is unfair to you because you wrote that tweet before I just said something nice. Now, it also lets me say, Buster, I'm out of the business of saying things nice about Texas until they earn it, okay? On my show, the Joel Klatt Show on the podcast, I've said no Texas talk, none. I won't do it until they do something to earn it. Earning it would be like, hey, go beat Alabama. And then I'll say something nice about Texas. And then I'll talk about your deep offensive line. And then I'll talk about 10 starters back on offense. And then I'll talk about your quarterback, whom I really like. And then I'll talk about you should be the favorite in the Big 12. Get what I'm saying, Buster? Love it. Hey, thanks for joining the program. We'll be back next week with another Breaking the Huddle. And as always, this show is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. It is the one fans deserve.